What better way to kick this conversation off than speaking to the brilliant comedian Abi Roberts, who joins me now in the studio. And we also have Mark Tuggan, the founder of the famous Glee Comedy Club, in the studio too. Abi.
Hello.
Mark, welcome. Abi, I'm going to start with you. You are a comedian. This is you ply your trade telling jokes. Have you ever had the people heckle you and boo you because of the content of what you're saying, because they're offended?
I've had lots of heckles. I'm quite good with dealing with heckles, especially if they're big men built like this. I usually just drink their pint in one go and then turn the glass upside down the table. That's usually how I deal with it. That's how most comedians worth their salt. Not everyone has the same style as me, but if you go back to people in America like Sam Kinison, George Carlin, people like that, they challenged, they were out there to it's almost like you want the atmosphere to be a bit, oh, are we going there, on the edge? You want women to have tenor ladies just in case. You do not want somebody coming out and saying, and now before I begin I'd like to give you a sermon on how many pronouns there are. You do not want that in comedy. Comedy is sacred in the sense that it should be a place where everything, where the most freedom is had, and at the moment we're seeing chip away at it. It's very worrying.
When you're writing your material, do you ever have that thing where you think, oh, should I include this? Is that going to be a bit too risky? Is that going to be too on edge? Is this going to create controversy? Do you find yourself actually self-limiting?
I wish I did, but I don't know. I don't. Exactly. I mean, I don't. I think there needs to be more comedians. I mean, I know there are a few of us who are quite sort of, we'll say what we mean, but actually I don't. I write my stuff, I put it out there, and frankly, if an audience member, if they don't like it, they can walk out. You bought a ticket, maybe I'm not your cup of tea, they can leave. But I have to say, nobody's left. And I hate this new puritanism that's happening in comedy. I mean, to be honest, it's like if these people were in charge of people's sex lives, they'd be there in the bedroom going, 3 out of 10. We don't want that in comedy. We don't want people sort of being censorious about comedy.
And Mark, I mean, you run a network of comedy clubs. Do you choose the people who come into your clubs based upon whether they're going to be safe? Do you think, well, I can't have that person, they're too controversial? Or you open the doors to anybody?
I want to continue to open my doors to anyone and everyone, and I did not I got into this business precisely because of the craziness and the anarchy and the anything goes attitude. But I'm concerned that what's creeping into my inbox, and this is a phenomenon just of the last couple of years, it's what I call professional offence taking. So my inbox will have, I took offence at this, I took offence at that, and it's usually somebody taking offence on behalf of another fictional, made-up character. And I don't really know how to deal with it. It's tough.
And what do? Do you just reply saying, I'm sorry if you found that offensive, but we are a comedy store and that's, that's the material we ply?
At the moment, I am pushing back. I'm saying, look, I'm sorry if you were offended, but look, I'm going to put on whoever's funny.
And have you had the baying mob at your doorstep at all, sort of, yelling outside? Have they turned up with their placards yet?
Not yet. But look, my fear is, and the comics that I do speak to who can talk to me candidly, they do say to me, we are auditing our act. We are checking what we say. Because if you think about it as a jobbing comic, that 3-second gag can end your life and end your career. Why take the risk?
Yeah,
that is a shame.
That's sad, isn't it, Abi?
Very true.
Because actually, we're going to end up with a very narrow and beige definition of what's funny if we continue down this road.
Very, very beige. In fact, I'm going to say it's lovely to meet Mark. I've played all of Mark's clubs. We've never actually met in person, but I would say the Glee is such a great atmosphere. I mean, they're probably the best clubs in the country, I would say, and I'd love a gig, thanks, in next week. But what I think is happening is there are people, not only comedians themselves, who are censoring other comics, which is a bit like Mao's China. We have people sort of checking, literally people going, yeah, that was a bit, maybe too, you're going straight into the wrong territory. But you've also got people in charge of comedy. I mean, the people who run the Edinburgh Fringe Award, Nika Burns, she said in 2018, I look forward to the woke comedy when there'll be a new kind of comedy in town. Well, thanks a lot, Nika, because this is what's happened. People are nervous. Comedians shouldn't be nervous.
Do you know many comedians who've sort of given up, fallen on their sword, who've, actually come under huge pressure?
Janey Godley.
Janey Godley.
Just recently.
Yeah. Janey Godley and I...
What was her crime?
Yeah, sorry, Mark, you explain.
She was found guilty, having some people gone through her historic tweets. You know, offence. They call it offence archaeology. But you know what she said. You know, it wasn't acceptable. But why couldn't people just accept her apology?
Yeah.
Why couldn't people just say accept the fact that she made a mistake?
Yeah.
But then who does decide what is acceptable and what isn't? You know, when you say that you you don't self-limit, but other people, you know, Mark, you said some of the people who do acts in your club say that they've sort of audited their content to make sure there aren't going to be clangers in there that are going to bring the mob to your door. But who are the mob? Who decides this stuff? I mean, the trigger warnings on old content. Who's there thinking, well, you know, we've got a list here of all the things that might cause offence, and today it's time for Little Britain to go in the bin?
It's the corporates. What's really worrying about this, and that's why I get very, very annoyed when people compare this to Mary Whitehouse. Mary Whitehouse was on the Christian right. She was very much about moralising. And, you know, it was quite a sort of, I mean, she put it this way, she didn't change institutions from within. She didn't put all her feelers into everything. This is much, much more serious. This is across everything now. So we need, if anything, you know, on Mark's behalf, on his club's behalf, on my behalf, we need more comedians to say, no, we're not playing that game. We're not going to do it. Or we'll bifurcate comedy. We'll have the funny people and then the others.
Well, do you remember when we first got going, comics almost used to compete with each other just as to how quickly they could make
silence a room
play, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I think that's just just not happening.
Yeah.
It's like how quickly can you do that risque joke?
Yes, exactly.
Because I felt that at one point we sort of reached a peak of offensive comedy almost. How offensive can you get with people such as Frankie Boyle, who really were sort of shock tactics sometimes? And you just think, you know, now I don't know what content comedians can cover. Do you find yourself thinking, you know, these subjects are probably off limits? Or do you think when it comes to comedians, whatever you are, whatever your taste, there is nothing off limits?
I don't think there is anything that's off limits in comedy. No, because comedy, like I said, is the one place. That's why I think it's interesting that the few comics like myself are speaking out, because we realise how important it is. Because comedy is, isn't it? It's the kind of linchpin of free speech. And if that starts to slip away, if we can't have sort of, you know, have that wonderful frisson where everything's a bit bristling, then we're in serious trouble, I think, in lots of other areas.
I mean,
you'll have to forgive me, but one of the great things about most of the comics I know is that, forgive me, they are quite thin-skinned. In other words, if the audience doesn't laugh,
yes, exactly.
How long do you think that joke's going to stay in the set?
Precisely.
So, you know, it's really simple. Yeah. If it's funny, keep it in.
Exactly.
If it's not,
yes.
Leave it out. Let the audience decide.
Precisely. It's democracy in action. Let the audience. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Dave Chappelle, because obviously that's the most recent person who is being hounded. You're a big name person being hounded for his previous shows on Netflix, and it seems to be very much. I watched his latest one the other day, and he's really socking it to his critics, isn't he? He's saying, "You're telling me not to enter into this territory. I'm going to go there." Do you think that was a wise decision? Is that the sort of affirmative action that we need to see happening? Or is that sort of potentially agitating people and stirring things up that could become unhelpful?
I am glad that Dave Chappelle is pushing back, because we need the really big names to go, you know what, enough's enough. It's not going to be enough, again, for, you know, a circuit comic to push back on it, because they don't have that power.
Yeah.
And I was interested to say as well, you know, even Chris Rock, who's somebody that he was one of my sort of comedy heroes. He's been quoted recently as saying, you know, guys, the problem is everyone's too scared to make a move.
Exactly.
And that's his way of saying, well, look, you know, if even people like Chris Rock are holding back, what's it coming to?
Yeah,
what signal is that sending out to the whole circuit?
Exactly. And also, you're right. Actually, weirdly, a lot of this has come from America. Even, I have to say, God bless Dave Chappelle. I'm a huge fan. But even he, in the past, has kind of been a bit, you know, saying, I remember him saying he felt that the laughter, some of his jokes, was the wrong kind of laughter. This was a few years ago. So maybe he should, and then he left his show. If you do things like that, you're kind of sowing the seeds. You know, although I think Dave's wonderful, but you know that's the truth of the matter.
I mean, when it comes to what you call offence archaeology, are there sort of previous comics and comedians you think, well, it is about right that they're in the dustbin of history, or do you think that everyone should have the opportunity to be resurrected, even if right now? I mean, evidently there were jokes, especially if we go back, you know, 5 decades or something like that, that would make most people today think, oh gosh, you know, not the sort of thing we say today.
I think everybody understands that tastes change and attitudes change. And, you know, I want to put on record that I actually think one of the sort of biggest moments for me personally in comedy when I saw the old guard moving to the new guard was when, you know, Bernard Manning was on the Mrs. Merton show.
Yeah.
And when she, you know, when that amazing moment came when she called him out and he actually sort of said, yeah, I am a racist. And it's almost as if that was a good moment for comedy because it was the moment at which the tectonic plates shifted from, yes, we've moved on from that onto the new. So we all accept that what was acceptable in the 60s and the 70s is less acceptable now or not acceptable now. We get that. But it's just, I'm just fearful that there's still a mob that's out to get almost anything that they deem to be just not to their taste.
And that mob's
gone the other way.
Ever.
Yeah, it's tipped over the other way.
Pendulum swing.
Yes,
it's just
swung
a bit too
now.
Oh.
It swung way over to the over to Maoist China somewhere.
Indeed. Mark, Abi, thank you so much, and keep people laughing. My word, after the year we've had, we need it.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in. It's been a pleasure.